Queen Esther. We're in chapter 2. I am going to tell you that I struggled this week to keep this short and neat and tidy. And usually my sermon notes with scripture reference are usually maybe 3 pages at the longest. Today we're 5. I'm just warning you. But some good stuff. Well, I think it's good stuff. If you don't like it, you can talk to Clem or David. That's right. So I actually, because I'm singing and I'm preaching and I like other people to participate in services, I'm going to get some of you guys to read some of the scripture. Can we do that? Well, we're going to. Okay. So lovely. Okay, so I need someone to read Esther chapter 2, verses 1 to 7. Esther 2, 1 to 7. Okay, go ahead.
Later, when King Xerxes' fury had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had about her. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, "Let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm. Bring all these beautiful women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Hegai, the king's wife, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatment be given to them. Then let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This advice appeased to the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin, named Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Among those taken captive were Jehoiachin, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Adasha, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died.
Thank you. Okay, so when we get into Esther 2, it's a continuation a little bit of what we talked about in the first one. So in the first one, the king makes a bad decision. He makes a bad decision, and then he compounds it by listening to bad advice, and then it just gets worse. And so he comes to, it says that later when King Xerxes' fury had subsided, let's also probably add in there he was sober. He remembered what he did. And maybe, because I want to say, maybe he realized for just a moment, just a split second, and but damage was done. And so, you know, he may have even been a little bit sorry for what had happened. Vashti was quite beautiful after all, and she was a great possession that he had. So maybe he felt a little bit remorseful, maybe. So much so that his personal attendants, so we're not even talking about his advisors, his personal attendants come and they give him a plan. And so this is a plan. We're going to find all the most beautiful virgin girls in your country, in your kingdom. And remember that his kingdom was massive. 180 days it took for him to show the entire wealth of his kingdom. 180 days. Massive. And we're gonna have basically a beauty pageant. And the one that pleases you, that's the one who's going to be queen. Woo-woo. That's exciting. It appeals to the king. It says that the king was appealed to. Why wouldn't it appeal to a king? Beautiful girls, why not? Right? My brother-in-laws and my brother, they have beautiful wives. But we don't read this story because it could cause a little bit of issues with the difference of opinions of what is good and what isn't good. Beautiful women, for one thing. You know, and the proper answer, husbands, in case you don't know this, is that your wife is the most beautiful woman in the world, right? So just remember that. Next time she asks you a question, maybe refrain from answering, actually. So there's a well-meant plan. The people who were doing this, they weren't actually malicious in their hearts. They weren't thinking about what they were going to do or what lives they were going to ruin or what was going to happen. They really meant well. They saw that their king was upset. They were trying to do their job and make him happy. And so it was a well-meant plan. So once again, people are thinking about pleasing the king, but it's all for his benefit, right? It's all for his benefit. He gets a new bride, a new queen. So of course he approves of that. But remember that the way to hell is paved with good intentions. I have a saying. I've had it for many, many years. I used to date this guy, and he wasn't very nice. Let's just say that. And I remember having an argument with him one day, and I said, you know, intent does not negate outcome. Just because you mean well, just because you mean to show up on time or actually show up, or whatever it was that we were arguing about, just because you mean does not mean that you now don't have to deal with the consequences. Intent does not negate outcome. So just because I mean well, if something bad happens, I'm still responsible for that something bad that happened, even though my intentions are good. And so we have people who they mean well, but there's no thought given to the girls who were going to be forced into the situation. And what that meant, understand that what that meant is that these young women who by essence were childbearing and all that, they were never going to have a family. They were never going to have a family. They were never going to be able to get married to somebody they might love. Because once they spent the night with the king, that was it. They went into his harem, and if he didn't remember them, that was it. And they lived their life separated from family and friends and people they knew. So as much as, yay, it's a beauty pageant, it wasn't. It was a life sentence for anybody who was beautiful. And some of these girls may have been promised to somebody. Some of these girls may have already had dreams and plans of what their life was going to look like. And it wasn't huge dreams. Listen, way back then, girls were not going to be rocket scientists, right? They were going to get married. They were going to have children. That was their life. That was the extent of their great dreams. But it was still a dream. And they no longer had the access to that dream because, once again, people meant well. And they made decisions. And he made a decision. So, we meet an orphan and her uncle. So, this is really important. This is something I learned this week, that I have studied Esther many, many times. And for whatever reason, have you ever done that? You've ever studied a scripture and you've read it and you've read it and you've read it, and then all of a sudden something clicks and you're like, why is that there? Anybody ever done that? So as I'm reading this, it occurs to me that Mordecai's lineage is there. So pay attention. When the Bible has somebody's lineage there, there's something they're trying to tell you. There's something they're trying to tell you. So, do you know who Mordecai's great-great-grandfather was? Anybody? Anybody want to guess? You know. You cheat. I told you. Honest. That's Clem's son. That's right. Who won all the food because he cheated last night? Did. King Saul. Thank you, Lige. King Saul was his ancestor. Now here's what's interesting. This is why I got excited about this. You may not get excited, but I got excited. Because guess who Haman's great-great-grandfather was? Anybody you want to guess? Haman was an Agagite. Say that 10 times fast. And the Agagites were a race of people that when Saul was king, God said, you need to destroy them. Every single last one of them. And what did Saul do? He didn't do it. And so later, I'm super excited about this because it's going to come up again. And I'm not going to give it away. But that is important. So sit on that. And so I'm just makes me shiver and tingle because there's just so many great things that come out of this epic battle that is about to come. He also came from the tribe of Benjamin, and so Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin as well, but also most of the judges in the book of Judges come from the tribe of Benjamin. And Paul the apostle is also from the tribe of Benjamin. So, along with the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Benjamin are now what we now know as the Jewish nation. A little bit of history: in about 782 BC, the other 10 tribes of Israel disappeared. They're not really sure what happened. It was during one of the invasions, and they were taken as captives, and then they disappeared. So, most people, if they're Jewish and can trace their lineage, either come from the tribe of Judah or the tribe of Benjamin at this point. Okay, so that's just a little surprise there. And now, something else about Mordecai that we need to understand, and this is found in different books. So he was a leader in the Jewish captives. So Ezra 2:2 mentions him. Nehemiah 7:7 he was one of those that led them out of captivity. This is proven by his position at the king's gate in Esther and his access to the women. So he had access to the queen, which was forbidden. But it also may indicate that he was actually a eunuch. So what often happened with Persia when they would take people, this is not heresy, I have proof of this. So when they would take captives, they would take the people of the royal family and the royal bloodlines, and they would castrate their males, and they would give them positions in government, but they would never be able to procreate. So that was actually a very common custom with the Persians. That's why the discussion that Daniel was a eunuch, and so were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, all around the same time. So I know you're like, I didn't come for a history lesson, but this is important. It is. I swear it is. So, and Esther was his brother's daughter, or his father's brother's daughter. And so they were killed, and he took on Esther, and Esther was considered his niece. All right, Esther 2, verses 8 to 10. Who can read that for me? Hello. I know you have it there, Calvin. I can see your wife handing it to you, so.
Under the care of Haggai, Esther was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai by charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with the nutritious and special food, assigned her 7 attendants, selected from the king's palace, and moved her attendants to the best place in the harem. Esther did not reveal her nationality and family background.
All right. So, sorry, could you read 11 as well?
Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard. Esther was happy.
Okay. So Esther was one of many women chosen. So there were many young women, they were beautiful women, and Esther was one of them. And there was a lot of competition. So ladies, let's be honest. When beautiful women come into the room, we start to look, don't we? Like, I have better hair than they do. Be honest, come on. Right? I have better sense of style. She's not that thin. So now understand, there are hundreds, perhaps even thousands of these beautiful young women who are there, and there's one prize. Oh, how lovely is that place to be? Worse than a missions trip with teen girls, I'm just telling you right now. Right? For those of you who have ever done a missions trip with teen girls, you know what I'm talking about. And so Esther comes in, and right away, There's something about her. And she finds favor. She finds favor. And so something about Esther, she stands out. And have you ever noticed, I've met some very beautiful people in my life. I'm surrounded by them in a lot of ways. I have a very beautiful family, and my best friend is stunning, and you know, and yet we're still friends. But have you ever noticed when somebody is really attractive that sometimes they open their mouth and all of a sudden they get less attractive, right? Sometimes what comes out of their mouth is ugly. What comes out of their mouth is hurtful or just plain old wrong. Have you ever noticed that? Sometimes beautiful people can become not so beautiful when their insides start to come out. But I think that Esther, okay, so here we go. So this is an opinion alert. So again, the opinions expressed are those of Pastor Kat and not those of CCPC. And so if you have any issues, please see a board member. Okay, yes. And know that they will come find you for the new search committee for a pastor. Okay. So there's my opinion. Esther's orphan situation and her being born a captive may have made her see an opportunity when others saw obstacles. My grandmother on my, her name was Bama, and she's actually my brother-in-law Jeff's grandma. When she was alive, she used to always say that blessed are young people who go through hard times because they will have a good life when they're older. And I used to hate that she would say that because I was a young person who had had a hard time. Until she sat down with me one day and said, because you have learned how to fall on your knees, because you have learned where your source of strength comes from, because you have learned not to get flustered and flapped when the other shoe drops, because you've learned how to be still in the midst of a storm. And so my opinion is that one of the reasons why Esther had stood out is that she had learned. Because of everything that she had been through in her life, that she had learned what beauty really was. And she had learned to be calm. And she had learned to see obstacles as opportunities. That's hard. That's hard. Sometimes I have to say something as a pastor because I know it to be truth, but it's hard for me to swallow because that's hard. When obstacles are actually opportunities. And so I think that she stood out because she was one of these people that understood that. And she was given protection and she was given honor. Regardless of the situation, she is granted protection and a place of refuge and safety, a calm in spite of the storm that is around her. And whatever she needs, she is given with an eye to giving her an edge, even to the fact that her uncle can still have access to her. No other woman has that but Esther. There is something about when we seek favor, and I mean good favor, not where we say things and do things that we don't actually believe or are contrary to who our being is. But when we pray, sometimes I pray for my nieces and nephews that they would find favor with men and with God. So they would be upright before the Lord, but that they would find favor with men. So that when they have an impossible situation or an impossible dream, it doesn't stay impossible. That they become people who see that an obstacle is actually an opportunity. Remember to who you belong, and everything else will be okay. So, Esther 2:12-16. Sarah, do you have it? You don't want to read it there, Sarah Lamb? Do you have it? Okay, ready?
And 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given her to take with the king's house. In the evening she would go there, and in the morning return to another side of the king.
Shashka.
Who was in charge of the conference. She would not return. When the turn came to Esther, the young woman, daughter of his uncle, go to the king. She asked for nothing other than one thing. Who was in charge of the justice? Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes' royal residence. The month of 7th year.
All right. So the thing about Esther is that her destiny was never in her hands. Her destiny was always in the hands of other people. And though she was chosen for her beauty, it wasn't enough, right? So she not only did she have to be beautiful, but she had to please the king. And so in order to hit that one point of being beautiful, she went to beauty school for 1 year. So she was dipped and pulled and stretched and massaged and painted and all kinds of great stuff. Any women ever go to the day at a spa? Not so much. It's not what was happening to this poor girl. And she was made to be as beautiful as she possibly could for 1 year. For 1 year. And at the end of the day, at the end of her 1 year, she had 1 shot. So there are no second chances. You can't go to another city and try out in a different city. You have 1 shot. And after that, you are sent to the concubine harem, which for some of these girls was nothing more than a ladies' prison. And it was a dead end. And so Esther, she is one of these women. She's one of these young girls. And her destiny was completely in the hands of others. It was in the hands of her uncle. It was the hands of Haggai, the eunuch that was taking care of her. It was the hands of the king. And let's be honest, the king hasn't shown that he's been very careful with the things that are in his hands. So, but one thing that Esther did is she listened to those who had knowledge. So she listened and she followed advice. Here's my thing. So as a pastor, I often talk to people and I love talking to people. I love to get to know people on a level. I want to hear their stories. I want to hear their life. That is what I find joy in. But here's what I don't find joy in. When people come to me on the 8th or 9th time, and I've heard the 8th or 9th time of the same story, and they're still not listening to what I've said. There's a reason why I don't appreciate that. And the reason is this, that if you really want help, you would listen to what good advice is. I'm not saying I got all the answers in the world, right? I'm not. I'm not that smart. But my thing is, if I'm asking people for advice, then what I'm really trying to say is I'm going to listen to the advice that you give me. And if you give me good advice, then I'm going to actually try and follow it. And so Esther was one of these rare people that when people offered her advice, good advice, solid advice, godly advice, she followed it. And because she was a girl who saw obstacles as opportunity, and she followed advice of those who knew what they were talking about, she was maybe more receptive to what was about to happen to her. So in other words, she had a good attitude. One of the things that I used to say a lot was, it's not how you say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. that your attitude and the inflection of your voice tells me more about what's going on in this than what's coming out of your mouth. Because the Bible says whatever's in the heart comes out of your mouth. So if you have something mean to say about something and then you say, just joking, guess what? Not really. So she was somebody who was maybe a little more receptive to what was about to happen. And she was accepted by those who actually were in authority. And so she found this favor that we talked about. And so when she was called up, it was 4 years, give or take, from when Vashti had refused the king. And I'm thinking, again, this is an opinion, again, all those things follow, right? Talk to the board, search committee, all that kind of stuff. I was thinking that she was actually not pushed on the king first. I think that they held her back. I think that they saved the best for last. I don't think she was rushed in there. I think the people that she found favor with, they knew what they were doing, and they knew a king wasn't going to choose somebody right off the bat because he was going to have too much fun. Sorry for being crude, but that's pretty much what was happening. And he wouldn't get around to the business of choosing a queen until he was good and ready. And they waited. So she was involved in this process. Although she had beauty regimens and that for a year, it was 4 years from the time that Vashti stepped down to the time that Esther stepped up. 17 and 18. I haven't heard you speak, Martin. You have it there? Okay. Oh, yes. See, that's why I always say that this is a better option for a Bible, because you don't ever have to scroll up. It's, look, right there, ready, willing, able. Actually, I need to find a bookbinder because my Bible's starting to fall apart. So, yes. Oh, 17 and 18, sorry. Yeah.
So now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any other woman, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his noble and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces, distributed gifts with royal liberality.
Liberality. Good job. Same thing, liberty. So she pleased the king. There's no doubt that Esther was chosen amongst all the beauties of the nation, and the king was attracted to her more than any that had gone before her. So she won. She won. And she replaced Queen Vashti. So Vashti's position became her position. Vashti's crown became her crown. And Vashti was no more because Esther became queen. And not only did she please the king, she replaced the queen, but then the king did one better. He celebrated her. So it wasn't enough that he's like, yeah, I found my queen, let's get on with life. No, he celebrated her. So great was his pleasure in Esther that he threw a huge feast. He had a holiday declared. He had given gifts. Like, now I'm thinking those gifts were something pretty cool, because this man was very rich and loved to show off his wealth. So he celebrated her. So Esther was an orphan that had now risen to the position of a queen. And so Esther 2:19 to 23, and I'll read this remaining, so you can all not jump it volunteering like you have been all Sunday morning. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, but Esther had kept her secret, her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. And so during the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers had guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. And this was recorded in the book of the annals that was in the presence of the king. Honor brings honor. If you honor someone, it brings honor. If you listen to somebody you respect, it brings respect to that person you're listening to. And so Esther was told by her uncle, don't tell anybody who we are. There's a reason for that. I don't know the reason per se, but there's a reason for that. He doesn't want anyone to know what Esther's lineage is. And maybe that's because she would be looked down upon. She may not have qualified for being a part of this whole search. There were many reasons why he told her not to, but she listened. She never told anyone who Mordecai was to her. She never told anyone who she was in the grand scheme of plan. And she honored her uncle by remaining obedient to his advice. But Esther also honors her king. She didn't look for a way out of her situation. In order to tell the king what happened, she would have to be in his presence. So she was with the king. She wasn't looking for a way to get out of her situation. She was honoring her king. And she gives her obedience to her king, just like she gave her obedience to Haggai, who was the eunuch over her before she went to the king, just as she gave her obedience to her uncle. And so she takes no credit, but makes sure the king knows exactly who gave the information. How many of you have ever worked with somebody and they take your idea and they present it as their own? Yeah? So one of the things about being a female in ministry, this is behind the little curtain, is sometimes I have worked with men who don't always honor me, and that's okay. I'm not offended or hurt. I'm a person that you may not believe in who I am because I'm a female, but I'm just going to prove you wrong. That's that. I don't fight about it. It's not my issue. It's other people's issue, and that's what I do. However, I have learned to be successful early on in my ministry life. I had to convince the senior pastors I were working for, the assistant pastors I was working with, that whatever my good idea was actually their idea. And then they presented it to the board, and then it got approval, and they got all the glory, but I got done what I wanted to get done. Because it's not about the glory. Well, for me, it's not. Right? And the same thing for Esther. She's very distinct, and so much so that the Bible says she was specific. She was articulate. She was succinct about saying it was Mordecai that uncovered this. She didn't claim anything for herself. And so Mordecai's grand uncovering is now in the history books in the king's presence, and that's going to come into play a little bit later. I love this chapter because it opens up all these doors into like what's coming next. I'm so excited. And so honor is extended to Mordecai because Esther honors Mordecai. And now his name is mentioned in the history books, and his name would be forever linked to an act that saved a king in return for a kingdom. And so we come to the end of our so what. Do you make the best of every situation, or do you make yourself miserable? I was on a missions trip. We went to Jamaica, and everybody hears Jamaica and they think, oh, resorts. No. I was in the center of Jamaica in a town called Mandeville, which is where a lot of the rich people live because it's cooler. It's kind of close to the mountains. When I say cooler, I'm not talking like cooler. I'm talking like maybe instead of being 98 degrees, it's maybe 90, right? So, but in the morning, the water is like, it's cold. And sometimes there's even ice on the water, and so you're showering with that water. And of course, where we were staying, right? No resort, so there's no hot water. And because I had to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning to make sure I got everybody out of their beds and made breakfast and do everything, I got to have the very first shower, which meant all the coldest water was my shower water. That's what I mean about a mission trip. So no resort. And we were encased in a bunker. It was a concrete bunker that had bars on every window, and it was locked from the inside and outside. So we would get locked in at night, and we were able to unlock it. One door we were unable to unlock to get out in case there was a fire, but we were in concrete, so whatever. Anyways, we had planned. We were doing. I told the story how we had a youth choir, and so we were traveling to Jamaica, and we were doing concerts at night, and during the day we were running a children's program in the morning. In the afternoon we ran a sports program for teenagers, and then in our spare time we were painting a Bible college and helping out, because there had been a huge hurricane the year before we went, and so we were helping clean up and doing stuff. So it was a very, very busy time, and so because of that, I planned one day that we were going to play tourist, and we were going to a place called Ocho Rios, and we were going to climb up Dunn's River Falls. And Dunn's River Falls is a falls that you can actually climb up, and it's crazy. In Canada, you would sign 1,000 insurance documents saying I'm not going to sue anybody, and like people were falling, and I honestly thought somebody was going to lose their teeth. Like, it's awful, but we were going to do this. Crazy group of youth and youth pastors. And so we had one girl who saw this and she got scared, and she's like, no, I'm not going. So my brother-in-law, who I was working with, I was his assistant at the time, amongst other things that I was doing. He said, well, you're going to have to stay back. You can't climb the falls because she's not going to go. Are you kidding me? So I have a temper. And I was not happy. And I was not happy because I had done all the work for this mission trip. I had found the place, I had contacted the Bible college, I had done all our traveling, I had done all the health insurance, I had done everything. I was getting up at 5 in the morning and making sure everybody ate. I made sure their lunches were done. When we came home for supper, I made sure everybody was moving. I planned one fun day. I wanted to go up Dunn's River Falls, and now I can't go? What? And you get to go, why? Because you're a guy? And you think that I'm what? And I got to babysit in Jamaica. Beautiful place where ocean and river meet, and it's this really cool place, and I don't care because I'm stuck with the youth who is going to be a pansy and not climb the falls in Jamaica. And I'm fuming, and I'm sitting there, and I'm feeling sorry for myself, and I am giving myself every excuse to be angry and be just such a snot. So embarrassed about my behavior after the fact. And this lady came up to me, and she attended my church at home. And she happened to be in Jamaica. Now, my church at home was about 1,000 people. So I knew her, but I didn't know her. But she knew me. And she's like, what's going on? And so I told her a very short version and not so angry version. At least I thought it wasn't angry. And she was like, you know what your problem is? Yeah, I love hearing that when I'm angry. Yeah, this conversation is going to go real well. She goes, the problem is you're sitting in one of the most beautiful places in the world and you can't even enjoy what you're sitting in because you're so angry about something that you have no control over. And you're making somebody else feel bad about it. And the only person who's making you angry and who's making your life miserable is actually just you. Have a nice day. And she walked away. And I just kind of was like, And so, of course, they came down and we climbed the falls, and I got to climb the falls and do that. But I had been so caught up in making myself miserable that I didn't realize that I was actually making myself miserable. It wasn't the situation that was the problem, it was me. And ever since that day, I have learned that when something happens, instead of reacting, is that I need to take a breath and say, okay, how bad is this? On a scale of 1 to 10. And what can I do to make it better? So do you make the best of every situation, or do you make yourself miserable? Do you listen to those who are wise, or do you ignore them? You know, sometimes working with youth and young adults, I'm not saying any of our youth or young adults do this here. I don't know, maybe you do, but they used to. You sometimes think that somebody who's older has no idea what they're talking about. Yeah? Anybody encounter that? How many of you have teenagers who know everything? You don't need Google. You got a teenager. Sometimes we get to this stage in life where we are convinced that old people have no more use. I'm an old person. I apparently am an old person. My niece who's 15 is like, Auntie, you're ancient. Not so ancient, I won't put you over my knee. You don't know what you're talking about, Auntie. Okay? Go ahead, you do what you're going to do. You come talk to me when it's done. Do we listen to advice? Good advice. Listen, you don't listen to every piece of advice that comes your way, but do you listen to good advice? Do you listen to godly advice? Or do you ignore it? And do you honor people? Or do you tolerate them? As a pastor, I meet tons of people. As a pastor in a church in different positions that I've held, sometimes people just tolerate me because I'm different. And I know they're tolerating me. That's the best part. I know they're tolerating me. And then that sick, twisted sense of humor that I have makes me like push their buttons. Well, I'm going to have a good time whether you are or not. Or do you honor people? This became very real to me one time when my sister had a very frank conversation with me and said, you know, you don't actually honor Mom, you just tolerate her. And it broke my heart. And I had to sit back and think, do I honor my mom who had given up her life for me? Who was handed the worst deck of cards that you could possibly imagine and did everything she could to keep me and my sisters and my brother together? Who made ketchup soup so we had something to eat rather than not having anything? Did I honor her or did I tolerate her? And I had to begin a journey on learning how to honor my mom. Do you honor people or do you tolerate them? Some of you are tolerating me now. I can tell. I see it in your eyes. I'm going to have the worship team come back up. We're going to sing one more song as we get ready to close. But I just want to say, I'm super excited about learning about Queen Esther, not because of anything other than this, that God may be hidden, but he's not hiding. understand that even though God isn't mentioned in those things, you can see the hand of God moving in Esther in ways that you don't always see in other books of the Bible. And maybe you see it more clearly because he's not actually mentioned. And so when the idea that Mordecai comes up and he's actually Saul's descendant, and I know his grand nemesis Haman is actually an Agite, and there's that whole thing, because this is what I understand, and this is what excites me, is that nothing is irredeemable. That irregardless of when we screw up, when God calls us to do something and we screw up, and let me tell you, I'm the biggest screw up of that. When I screw up, it is not irredeemable, because God will bring it around again, and there will be a second chance. As long as he tarries, I will always have a chance. That's what I get excited about. So we're going to sing a song I've been singing all week. And you know it, I think. Yeah.